Welcome to an all-new Restoration Today podcast
brought to you by Abatix. Since 1983, Abatix has been serving the restoration, remediation, industrial, construction, and disaster response markets with thousands of products from some of the most trusted brands in the business. Abatix is a customer-first distributor where service, knowledge, and community matter. For more, visit abatix.com.
Hello, restorers. Thanks for checking out another episode of the Restoration Today podcast. I'm letting you know right up front that we had a little bit of a technical glitch with this one, and unfortunately, only part of the video was recorded. And so we are releasing this one in audio only. So the rest of this episode is just going to be audio only with a slate over it if you're watching on YouTube. But this is a great opportunity to check out our podcast. You can find it on all of your favorite streaming platforms. A lot of people listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I actually find that the bulk of our listeners are audio only because I try to keep my podcast short and sweet. So hopefully you can listen to it on your drives between job sites. So this podcast, I'm excited to continue the conversation with Mike Fulton. He and I did our first podcast together probably in the fall, and really had a good conversation. I had the chance to finally meet him in person at the Elevate conference a little earlier this year. And now he is back on the podcast, and we are talking about a lot of things from pricing to integrations to some of the challenges that restorers are facing today, what's happening with Xactware, and everything in between. We're going to really talk about a lot. So I am just going to get the conversation rolling. I'm going to start by tossing it over to Mike to share a little bit about himself, and we are just going to get this conversation rolling. So restorers, buckle up. And hey, if you have questions that you want me to ask Mike in the future, shoot me an email and let me know. But without further ado, here is my discussion with Mike Fulton, the CEO of Xactware. Hello there. Thanks for checking out this episode of the Restoration Today podcast. Today, I'm very excited to be continuing a conversation with Mike Fulton. We had our first kind of conversation in late 2021 about everything that's going on in the restoration and insurance claims industry. And so I'm excited to have Mike back on today to continue that conversation going. So Mike is the CEO of Xactware, or Verisk Property Estimating Solutions, as they're now known, through a rebrand that they just went through within the last maybe like month, 6 weeks or so. So Mike, thank you so much for being here. For those who maybe don't know you, can you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background in the industry and how long you've been involved?
A long time. Well, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me back on this. Really enjoyed the first one we did. Hope we continue to keep having these. My background is in construction, like so many folks within the division formerly known as Xactware, now Verisk Property Estimating Solutions. Been active in the construction industry since high school and college. So this goes back into the 1970s. Started with Xactware in 1992. Spent most of my time within that company managing the group that researches and publishes the building cost data that we produce, and really built that up from the ground up. And then have been in the position that I'm in now since 2015, since about mid 2015. But I stay actively involved. This is a great industry for me because it enables me to work, in a heated building in the winter and an air conditioned building in the summertime. And but I still love to get my hands dirty. That's how I get my therapy is by building things. So enjoy it very much. We've got a great group of folks within the Xactware organization. I always enjoy these kind of connections.
I enjoy it too. And I know that our last conversation got quite a bit of traction. So I'm hoping that we can keep that going. So I appreciate your time a lot. Do you have any idea? I have people ask me all the time what size the restoration industry is, how many contractors there are. And my answer is, it's a very moving target. Do you have any idea how big it is?
I don't know because the restoration industry has changed. It has become a lot more digitized lately. So we think we've got a pretty large market share, but even then it's an estimate. We trend to couch when we start talking about our market share in the terms of contractors who use a computerized estimating program. We think we've got somewhere in the 80% range of that kind of a market, but there's a number of them out there, a lot of smaller insurers, smaller restoration firms that are not using an estimating system, or they're using a competitor to Xactware. So that used to be, when I last checked, that the industry itself was somewhere in the neighborhoods of like a $20 billion a year industry in the US. I think that's frankly changed. I mean, obviously with inflation, that changes, and the number of insured events that continue to happen across the board raise the bar significantly in that. But it's a really difficult thing to estimate.
Yes, sure. Okay.
It's
All right.
massive.
Yes. And
It's
I
massive.
always,
Not as big as the remodeling industry, but it's massive.
that's true. And remodelers, well, I guess same as restorers can be a one-off, like, and with the franchises, I figure they're changing over all the time too, especially the smaller ones. So how can you keep track? So I want to talk about Elevate a little bit. I had the opportunity to be at Elevate, the Xactware user conference, essentially, in early February, right around Valentine's Day. And so I'm curious kind of the feedback that you're getting and what you think sets Elevate apart from other learning education opportunities in the industry.
Yeah, we really love it. This was our 13th year. Last year in 2021, it was completely virtual, 100% virtual, like so many were. And frankly, with Omicron this year, with it starting to spike, about a month before the event, we considered making it virtual again, but we just decided to plow through. It was a limited event. We were limited by the hotel that hosts us to the number of people that were able to attend on site. I think we had about 350 that registered for the in-person event, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 that registered virtually. But I had a lot of great feedback from folks. A lot of them, maybe not surprisingly, just said thanks. Thanks for having a live event, because it's so great to get out and network with people. And it is different from some of the other big conferences that you have. We don't have an expo. We don't have a trade show floor. It's really meant to be a networking event. And there's so many. If you look at the Grand America Hotel, really nice hotel, as you saw, that's in Salt Lake. It's the only 5-star hotel in the state that was built for the Olympics back in 2002. It was built to host VIPs during the Olympics in 2002. But a great conference center, great ballrooms, huge areas, really top-notch food, great restaurants nearby. They've got meeting rooms on several floors that are just jam-packed with people having sidebar meetings. And frankly, between each of the different breakout sessions, which we have both being presented by Verisk personnel, as well as customers and other industry partners that come and present that which they do. But between each one, there are just networking opportunities in the hallway, a lot of high top tables where people just meet and talk. And some of the great comments that I've had in the past from people is, this is where, PLRB, if you're familiar with that, PLRB is where people go to party. Elevate is where people go to get work done, and people making comments that, we can get more work done in that 48-hour period than we can in several months otherwise, because it's just an opportunity to meet with folks and network. Now, this being a limited in-person event, and many insurers haven't yet opened up their travel policy as much as restorers and IAs have. It was really limited from an insurer participation. That was some of the other feedback, is it would have been nice to have more from the insurance carrier side. I agree, but it's typically there's so many folks from different walks that come in there. It's primarily insurers, restorers, IAs, but there are also public adjusters, there are attorneys, there are consultants. There's just a number of folks that attend the event.
Yes. Okay. So some of the relationships I was excited to make there kind of had to do with the InsureTech side of things. And I already knew some people at Homey, but then Hover was there and some others. So where do you kind of see InsureTech going in the industry in the next 5 years and the role it's going to play, especially on the estimating and claims side of things?
Well, automation is the key, and everybody is marching down that road. The thing is that automation means different things to different people. So for a restorer, what is automation for them? You're not going to automate the actual repair of the home, but there are things that we can do to perhaps make a restorer more productive. And that's really our goal, so that they can get onto those things that they really do best, which is restoring the home and getting people back into their home. From an insurer perspective, they want to involve the policyholder much more directly. That was really brought forward with the pandemic, because people had to. It used to be that in order for me as an insurer to provide what I would call what people would call a white glove service, or a really first class service, you need to get somebody out there to visit that person. And I think there's some great things related to that. We spoke about it in our expert panel session, but one of the challenges with adjusting remotely is that you often don't experience firsthand the damage. You're not standing there in front of a home that's had significant damage, talking to someone whose life has just been disrupted in just a massive way. And hopefully, nothing really tragic has happened via loss of life. But I think as much as remote adjusting is very positive, you really got to get people out into the field once in a while so that they can have that empathy and know how it feels. But back to automation, that's what everybody's trying to accomplish. On the restorer side, when you start looking at the ability for the technology here to do really accurate measuring of spaces, and some of the new LiDAR technology, specifically on the new iPhones and iPads, to be able to measure and diagram a structure in a fraction of the time that it used to take to go out and stretch out a tape measure and draw these things out in our Sketch application. You can literally tag each wall in the room, tag the door and the window openings, and have it calculate and actually draw that thing to scale, and very accurately, very, very accurately go into the next room, tag it, identify the door, and it just starts stitching them together for you. So I think that's very positive. Other cool things are just object recognition. So the challenge with doing an inventory, personal property inventory for an adjuster or someone that focuses on garment restoration or, furniture restoration, things of that nature, that has great uses for the policyholder as well. I mean, one of the challenging things for a policyholder is documenting all your personal property. I'm in the insurance business, have been 30 years. I don't have a good personal property inventory for my home. But, it's just, those are the things that are real important. Because when you think of how insurance is based, property insurance, your coverage value for your personal property is always a percentage of your coverage value for the home itself. And that just doesn't apply, if you're living in a McMansion in Texas or Oklahoma versus a very expensive bungalow in the Bay Area. It doesn't apply really well. But that's really what we're trying to do. And InsureTech, when you think of all of the things that you've got to do in a property claim, from FNOL, first notice of loss, to payment on the back end, you got fraud detection, you got coverage verification, you got valuation, you got workflow management. There's all these little links in the chain that, Michelle, from a restorer perspective, might want to have them linked together in this order. Mike, from an insurer perspective, might want them linked together in this order. And I may want to plug in an InsureTech into any one of those links and substitute that which Verisk is doing, or perhaps something that Verisk isn't yet doing. And so the InsureTechs really have a great opportunity to just add these little use cases that might be, very nuanced and very nice for someone to be able to apply in their home. But it goes, even that which we see here, for the measurement and the object recognition is some level of InsureTech that's being produced by the Apple organization.
Okay, so you mentioned the trends panel, and I'm going to pull up a quote that you said in there, and I'm sure you know what quote it's going to be. This is not something that's new that you've said. It's not something new that you've said. And so I want people who are watching this to understand Mike has been saying this for years. And so I just want to dig into it a little bit more. So you said the right price is not something that you're going to put across the board for every single claim in every single area in a particular market. That's something that's specific to the hall and specific to the contractor that's doing the work. We have to be flexible. So can you dive in a little bit on what it means? What does flexibility mean in that statement?
Well, flexibility to understand that every home is custom for the most part, even though they may not look it. Every home is custom. You can't equate what happens in the property insurance industry to that which happens in the auto insurance industry. There's a finite number of makes and models of cars on the road, each with a finite number of parts. The work is always done in a shop that's heated in the winter and air conditioned in the summer. My tools are never more than 25 feet away. And my parts are just delivered there. And you've got specific schedules, that are published by the manufacturers of those autos. You can look up a certain make and model of car, and it says, okay, if you're going to replace the alternator on this thing, that should be X number of hours. If you're going to replace the radiator, if you're going to replace the transmission, it should be this. But from a home's perspective, the location of the home, hillside construction versus non-hillside construction, working in a basement versus a main floor versus an attic, and the fact that once I purchase my home, I modify it. I do things that are different within that home. They don't have a finite number of parts. And we have to realize that is what makes each situation potentially unique. Now, many restorers will still use a similar price nationwide, frankly, within their organization. And I think more power to them if that's what they want to do. But the waste of materials, applying a sheet of 7/16 OSB on a gable end, where you're going to be wasting significant amounts of it, versus a straight wall, is different. The labor to do those things is significantly different. So you have to just realize that there are differences in those things. And the flexibility from my perspective is just understanding that, apart from the fact that restorers have different needs from a margin perspective, from an overhead perspective. What do they do within their organization, the size of their organization, between one and the other? I think there needs to be a true flexibility in what's allowed to be charged, what's right on one home versus the next. And that's really what we're trying to express. Now, from an insurer's perspective, consistency is important. Mm-hmm. This is kind of what this is in my mind. This is what's kind of a strange thing. If Michelle and Mike own homes that are identical, let's say they're identical and they're next door to each other, and both of our roofs are damaged by the same storm on the same day, and you hire John Doe Roofing to come out and repair your roof for $10,000. I get my brother-in-law to repair my roof for $7,000. Used to be, in the old world, each of our insurers settled up with us, or if it was a single insurer, we're insured by the same company, settled up with us. Mike gets $7,000, Michelle gets $10,000. But in today's world, there's this, and that is according to the insurance policy, right? We pay to repair or replace your home, whatever it's going to cost. Yeah. There's a tendency for Mike in the new world to say, hey, I got shortchanged $3,000. Even though they actually paid for my roof to be replaced by the guy that gave me a bid, and it was an active bid, I feel I should have gotten that other $3,000. So there's this different mentality in today's world. And from an insurer's perspective, they like consistency. Mm-hmm. They want to make sure that we're treating everybody fairly and promoting the same type of pricing. And so that's what we have to find, is what's that balance between the two things. How do I ensure that Michelle's home and Mike's home are getting repaired appropriately by the contractors whom we choose, and at the same time that we're applying some consistent rules to how those things are done.
So you mentioned margins. Is there a reasonable margin in restoration? And what does that look like? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's been a while since I've explored it. It used to be, if you, depending upon whether you're talking gross margin or net margin, but it used to be gross margin, I think, was somewhere in about the 45% range, something like that. May still be the case. The trouble is those things continue to get eroded by higher and higher overheads that are happening in our marketplace. And I know that's difficult. From a net margin, when I was in the business, if I could make 10%, I was completely happy. But in our business, there's a significant amount of education. All the guys that are listening to this know, I'm not certainly, but there's a significant amount of expense in today's world that continues to grow. 20 years ago, how many were you supplying mobile phones for your people? Mm-hmm. Were you supplying iPads for your people? Did everybody have a laptop? In today's world, you want to compete. The guy that has the nice trucks that are washed on a weekly basis and have their nice logo painted on the side. The marketing expense, the advertising expense is significant for them. So I don't know what the correct margin is, but it may be different for if Mike is working out of my shop in the back of my lot versus Michelle, who's got a very large organization with 150 employees and is renting space in an industrial part of town, and so on.
Yes. Okay. So what's Xactware's overall feeling on 10 and 10, especially on smaller jobs and contractors trying to use 10 and 10?
10 and 10 is one that I personally think we need to work through, because what happens is it's this ceiling that's been put as this standard in the industry, and people have got to make an appropriate profit to be able to reinvest in their business. Mm-hmm. And what happens is if you can't put things 10 and 10, if you think of 10% profit and then 10% overhead, and that overhead should be what we would call general overhead expenses. So if I'm going out on a job, it's the cost for my rent at my place and my trucks and things of that nature. Anything I can't attribute to a specific job. Mm-hmm. right? Because I'm going to put job specific overhead in the cost of repairing Michelle's home. And that's, sometimes the gas to get out to your house and the tools and things like that I expend. But, my marketing expense, things of that nature, training expense for my people, even mobile phones, I'm paying a monthly fee for those things that really fall under the heading of general overhead. Because you're held to this ceiling of 10%, they creep into the job specific overhead. So they start creeping into the unit prices. And we saw it years ago when many in the industry said, we're not going to pay overhead and profit on cleaning or water mitigation. Well, you push down here, and what comes up over here is the individual rates to clean a thing goes up. So I think you've got to be, again, flexible with those. I think if we could come together as an industry and really decide what is appropriate, that I think we'd be much better off. In the end, it doesn't mean that more money is being spent. It just means that it's being accounted for in the right columns.
Yeah, I liked your analogy of push down. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So what about T&M or time and materials on like larger losses? What's the viewpoint of that?
Yeah, that's a product that we are planning to build.
Okay.
And we haven't yet. We are exploring that now. I think that's a great way to do things, specifically on the very large jobs. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was building new homes or doing remodeling work, I often did a time and material type of estimate for people, or would do a cost plus. What's my cost plus a certain amount of percentage? And from a customer perspective, they like that. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to account for those things. Yeah. And I will say Xactware kind of morphed the industry, evolved the industry into this unit price model that we use on the personal line side today. But I think time and materials is a great way to estimate. That way you're focused on what's a common price for the hourly rate. What should I be paying for an hourly rate for Mike's company versus Michelle's company? What should I be paying for the sheet of OSB? Things of that nature. And then it's just, what does this job require? How many hours does it require? How many sheets of OSB does it require? That's the difference. It's a much more accurate way to estimate.
Okay. So kind of still on the pricing thing. So Verisk has traditionally said that you're not here to predict pricing. You're here to report on it, right? But there's so much going on in the marketplace right now with inflation and then other things going on in the world today that could further affect what things look like. So has there been any adjustments within Verisk or the Xactware group for predicting versus reporting to try to get ahead of the prices or understand more?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're right. We've historically stayed away from forecasting prices. Now, I look at forecasting typically, in my mind, I've equated that to more long-term forecasting. What do we expect, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now? And our position in the marketplace as a reporter of building costs, so that you as a restorer have an appropriate level of information from which you can estimate, has been so large that if we, let's say post cat, let's say we have a category 3 hurricane that hits Louisiana, for us to say that here's the price today, but we anticipate within 4 months this price is going to be X, it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. We're no longer news reporters, we're news makers. And so what we're trying to walk that careful balance there, but nonetheless, we are publishing prices on a monthly basis. And as we've seen of late, certainly last year and still going on, the price, if I research the cost of that sheet of OSB that we keep talking about on here we are, if I researched it last week on February 25th, in order to publish a price on March 1st that I want people to be able to use and reference throughout the month of March, it's perishable. It's highly perishable, that price. And so we've got to build in that perishability factor to make sure that that price that Mike is using, based upon the trend that we've seen over the last couple months, should be good throughout the month of March. That's one thing that we're doing. The next thing that we're doing is trying to provide and working on this today is, so the forecast throughout that month, making sure that a price is good throughout the coming month. That's being done today. What's not being done today is the more long-term forecasting that's really intended to be an analytic that a contractor might be able to reference to say, if we anticipate things going in a certain way, and price increases, demand surge are always a product and the result of the amount of damage that's been done, the amount of the workforce that's able to service that damage, to be able to say from a long-term analytic perspective, your impact for this storm ought to be this 6 months from now. That helps an insurer to be able to set appropriate reserves. It helps the contractor to be able to plan and know what to expect actually going into whether they've got to bring people in from out of state to service that loss. This, I think, it's beneficial, but again, we've got to walk that balance. I want to report the news and have a different product that's out here that says this is what we expect to happen long-term from that storm, rather than having it be just self-fulfilling prophecy. The other thing that we've got to be cautious of, and in our market, is and I'm trying to be very careful here, because on the insurer side, typically you owe, and this is based upon the policy language in many cases, I owe Michelle for the costs at the time of the loss. And in a post-storm situation, if I come out and give you an estimate, and if it's completely accurate for Mike's Roofing to repair your roof today, but Mike's Roofing can't get to your house for 3 months, that price is different. And they've got to be cautious of those things. And I think they're becoming more and more aware of that. And I think that's a shift in the industry that ultimately we're going to see.
Yes, I was talking to a contractor within Blue Sky last week, and they were talking about that, how they're on the contractor side having more and more conversations with their customers about all right, these prices are changing constantly. So yes, it's across the board. So what are some things that Xactware is doing to hear from your customers on a quarterly or a monthly basis, or whatever it is, both from the carrier side and the contractor? So you're hearing from both sides and kind of bringing that together.
Yes, the same processes that we've always used that we've historically used remain in place. I mean, it's an open door, open phone line, open email line. We have got a great team of highly experienced construction professionals that are researching this information, analyzing it, and we're using a lot of automated tools to analyze that as well. We've got a lot of relationships with suppliers in the marketplace from equipment perspective and a material perspective, who are just continually feeding us with information from each market. That's awesome. But the number of people that we've got, if you just think of the number of line items that we're publishing, the frequency at which we're publishing them, and the number of markets in which we're publishing them, we need more information. So one of the things that we've informally done historically is to leverage people in the field who can reach out to us. Michelle Blevins' restoration company can reach out and call Mike anytime she wants and say, Mike, you don't realize what's going on with the cost of air movers in this particular market. But trying to formalize that informal process is a recent initiative. Actually worked really well with the RIA organization to develop this. So kudos to them. But we're actually opening it up to everybody. And that's where we'll have a select group of restorers in each market that we've certified. In other words, we have trained them on how to communicate with us. They've trained us on how to communicate with them. They have a good understanding for how our process works, how the line items within our building cost database work, what is included, what's not included. So we put them through a certification course. It's an 8-hour course. They have to adhere to a code of ethics, because we want to make sure that people are on the up and up. The whole idea here is to have a very high degree of trust between us and them, and making sure that we would treat them as I would any employee, frankly, that's within our pricing research team. These are going to be eyes and ears for us formally in the field. And that's a new program that is just kicking off. We were slowed down pretty significantly, like we were with everything else from the pandemic, but really looking forward to growing that. We just had the first class late last year. I think we had roughly a dozen in that course, and I've been talking with Greg Pine, who's our VP of pricing data, to get the other one in the books pretty quickly. But want to start having these on a regular basis to build that up. The whole idea being they would be able to come in through not just a typical phone line, not just through pricing@xactware.com, that email address, but have a first name of a person that they can contact on our team, and we can reference the information that they're providing. And then we have to do a very minimal amount of independent verification on that data so that we can leverage it going forward. This just expands the size of our team exponentially, and I think is going to be a great tool for us, great tool for the industry.
How can contractors find out more about this Pricing Analyst program?
So there should be but with the change in branding and the change of websites, I couldn't tell you specifically where it's located, but we will be, as we grow this, we'll have a place where people can actually go and learn more about it on our website and sign up for it. Now, we're going to try and limit it as much as possible. But I want to, again, balance that with the need to have as many people in it as we realistically can and can realistically manage. But if you think of a large MSA like Los Angeles, we could probably use a dozen people in that particular market. If you look at a smaller one, such as Waco, Texas, we need 2 or 3. So there's going to be some management of those types of things, how many people we want to have in that pool. And we may rotate people as we go through it. So more information to come. But because it's just yet started, we haven't heavily marketed it out into the field yet, but more to come.
Okay. So in our last conversation, we talked about data, and contractors are worried about how much data carriers and like Verisk and others are getting from them. But on the flip side, Verisk has a lot of data that can be useful to the contractors as well, right? So what is some of the data that contractors could be tapping into that might help with their restoration business?
Well, knowing what your time and process metrics are as an organization and how you compare to others that are your peers in your particular market, I think are important. Knowing what, this carrier requires for SLAs for, how soon I have to get somebody out on site, how soon I have to return an estimate, things of that nature, what I'm allowed to include in my estimate versus not, knowing what those metrics are on a per insurer basis, knowing how you meet those metrics, knowing how your peers in the market, without revealing a specific name of a peer, but comparing yourself to the industry. So if I'm Mike Fulton Restoration in Central Utah, I should see an aggregate number of what everybody else is doing in Central Utah. I can't see what John Doe or Jane Doe Restoration is doing specifically. I ought to be able to know what my peer group is providing. I think that's important to people. You want to be able to see some of those metrics on, what has happened from a building cost perspective, both as a historical trend, as well as a projected course of what we anticipate having. I want the ability, the new online price list editor, which we talked about at Elevate, is something that we open up to everybody. This gives you the ability to go into an online tool, pull in an Xactware published price, and modify it to make your own custom price list for Mike Fulton Restoration, and then tag that so that it can be delivered to all of my people. Or I can go into the editor itself and just start from scratch, start from square one and build my own price list and do it that way. I think that's something that's highly beneficial to people.
So what should contractors do if they have their own price list like that, but they're getting pushed back from a TPA or a carrier?
Therein lies the challenge, and therein lies the discussions that have to be had relative to, how do you perform work in a particular market? Mm-hmm. There are many that I know that are able to use their own custom price list, and it's just whether that's through some degree of trust or whatever. But the challenge of having the distance relationship between contractor and adjuster has something that's grown just due to our digitized space. I mean, it's a great thing from a communication perspective, but it's, the old days of the contractor meeting the adjuster on site and, even having a personal relationship, perhaps outside of work, just, it seems those are further and fewer between when that actually happens. But it's got to be an ongoing conversation. I know that some are more successful at it than others, but it does require a very high degree of trust. Sometimes those that are successful at it have done so by coming in and being the person that corrects the errors of another company that has not done so in the past.
Yes, Ed Cross just wrote about that. That's interesting. Okay. All right. Before we wrap it up here, I wanted to talk a little bit about Restoration Manager. I had the opportunity to have lunch with Tony Plank when I was at the show. And I know that Restoration Manager is something that you're kind of marketing, pushing, getting back into the forefront of people's minds. So what in your mind are some things that set Restoration Manager apart from other job management platforms that are out there? There's a number of them, and it's a kind of a growing space, as we talked about tech earlier.
Well, it's very tightly integrated with our tools. So that is one benefit. I mean, obviously with our open ecosystem, we are integrated with Restoration Manager's competitors as well. frankly, we're trying to determine if this open ecosystem thing is actually a two-way street, because we're actually trying to integrate Restoration Manager with a competitor of Xactimate at this point. But really going to find out if that's really a two-way street. But it is highly integrated with our system. But the ability to track your job costs from one job to the next, to schedule your crews amongst jobs, to track the equipment that is located at one job versus another, just typical things that are available to much of these workflow programs that have very similar features. But I believe that we're much more cost effective from a price of the software perspective than our competitors are. But would love to have people come and learn more about it. We would give people a demo anytime they want.
Okay. And really quick on that note of integration, what are some things that Xactware is doing to kind of encourage integration, or Restoration Manager, Verisk as a whole, encourage integration and more of an, I don't know that do you have an open API or no? I know some people do.
We do in some areas. I mean, that is a significant strategy of ours. We've got so many products into which that's got to be built that it's moving a little bit more slowly than I would like. So we do offer up integrations. Right now, those integrations are more or less an EDI type of connection. So it's you do something here and it travels through our network over to this other product. But our strategy is to build out a larger API type of solution across the board, so that those switches, once we decide to flip a switch to integrate someone, can be done much more easily. The biggest challenge we have from an integration perspective is because we're the platform upon which people operate, through which a carrier's data flows and is stored, we have a high degree of security that we have to apply to that data. Because, it's really weird, Michelle, in our world today that the information that we store, we're not storing credit card numbers. We're not storing social security numbers. We're not storing much more than you used to be able to find in the public phone book. But I mean, it used to be, people could look up Mike's name and address and phone number in a public phone book, and you'd be horrified if people could do that today in many cases. But, that's the information that we still have to protect. And we have to make sure that an InsureTech that comes to us that wants to integrate can provide that same level of protection, which means they've got to have a significant level of cyber liability insurance, that nature. And that's one of the biggest things that slow us down from integrating with a smaller InsureTech, is they're just not yet ready to do those types of things.
Okay, perfect. Okay, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up? We talked about a lot. This is great information. So thank you for being so open and having such good discussions with me.
Yeah, I don't know, other than just, appreciate the opportunity to do this, appreciate the patronage and the partnership we have with the industry and all of our customers. Again, the open door, open phone line is always there. Please reach out anytime that we can assist with you. I think there's going to be some really cool things that you're going to see happening in the next 12 months and then beyond. So stay tuned and buckle up. I hope everybody remains safe and that we all get back to normal.
Yes.
Because we can.
Yes, me too. Well, thank you so much, Mike. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation and having more of these moving forward. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
Thanks, Michelle. Take care of yourself.
You too.
For more Restoration Today, visit our website, cnrmagazine.com, or find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts.